Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we'll be continuing the same lesson, that is the storyteller. In case you have not watched the first part, I request you to please go back to my channel, watch it, or you can click the link given in the description box, watch it and then come back for this video. And for the ones who have already watched the first one, let's continue with this interesting story. She was so good, continued the bachelor, that she won several medals for goodness, which she always wore pinned to her dress. There was a medal for obedience, another medal for punctuality, and a third for good behavior. They were large metal medals and they clinked against one another as she walked. No other child in the town where she lived had as many as 3 medals, so everybody knew that she must be an extra good child. Horribly good, quoted Cyril. Everybody talked about her goodness, and the prince of the country got to hear about it, and he said that as she was so very good, she might be allowed once a week to walk in his park, which was just outside the town. It was a beautiful park, and no children were ever allowed in it, so it was a great honor for Bertha to be allowed to go there. Were there any sheep in the park? Demanded Cyril. Now, the bachelor continued his story. He started telling that she was very good and she had won several medals for goodness, and she always wore those medals and she had pinned it on her dress. Now, there were 3 medals totally. One was for obedience, one was for punctuality, and the other one was for good behavior. They were large metal medals, and she wore it together so it would make a sound when she would walk. Any child in that town did not have this, so everybody knew that she was a very good, special child. Now the small boy, Cyril, he said, horribly good. That is that Bertha, she's so good. He continued, saying everybody talked about her goodness, and the prince of that country, he got to hear about her, and he said that she was so very good, so she might be allowed once a week to walk in his park. It was just outside the town, and it was a very beautiful park, and it was not allowed for anyone to enter it. It was a special park just for the prince, but now he gave a permission saying that Bertha could come there but once a week. So Cyril asked, were there any sheep in the park? No, said the bachelor. There were no sheep. Why weren't there any sheep? Came the inevitable question arising out of that answer. The aunt permitted herself a smile, which might almost have been described as a grin. There were no sheep in the park, said the bachelor, because the prince's mother had once had a dream that her son would either be killed by a sheep or else by a clock falling on him. For this reason, the prince never kept sheep in his park or a clock in his palace. The aunt suppressed a gasp of admiration. So the bachelor said, no, there weren't any sheep. And immediately he asked again, why weren't there any sheep? Now aunt, who was listening to all this, she had a smile on her face now, because it was the same thing that was happening with her when she was telling the story. The kids were asking frequent questions. So now her smile was described as a grin. So the bachelor said, there were no sheep in the park because the prince's mother, she had a dream once, and in that dream she saw that her son would either be killed by a sheep or else by a clock falling on him, And because of this dream, because of this reason, the prince never had sheep in his park or a clock in his palace. Now, listening to this, the aunt, she gave a gasp of admiration that she was shocked so beautifully the bachelor has given an answer to them. Was the prince killed by a sheep or by a clock? Asked Cyril. He is still alive, so we can't tell whether the dream will come true, said the bachelor unconcernedly. Anyway, there were no sheep in the park, but there were lots of little pigs running all over the place. What color were they? Black with white faces, white with black spots, black all over, grey with white patches, and some were white all over. The storyteller paused to let a full idea of the park's treasures sink into the children's imaginations. Then he resumed. Cyril asked again, was the prince killed by a sheep or by a clock? So the bachelor says that no, he is still alive. So we cannot tell whether that dream will be true or not. Then he continued again. Anyways, there were no sheep in the park, but there were lots of little pigs. So immediately the kids asked, what color were they? So he said there were many types of pigs. Black with white faces, white with black spots, black all over, grey with white patches, and some were white all over. Different colors of pigs everywhere. Then the storyteller, that is the bachelor, he paused. He kept quiet for some time. He kept quiet so that the children can get the entire idea of the park's treasure or that imagination. Then he started again. He continued. Bertha was rather sorry to find that there were no flowers in the park. She had promised her aunts with tears in her eyes that she would not pick any of the kind prince's flowers, and she had meant to keep her promise. So, of course, it made her feel silly to find that there were no flowers to pick. Why weren't there any flowers? Because the pigs had eaten them all, said the bachelor promptly. The gardeners had told the prince that you couldn't have pigs and flowers, so he decided to have pigs and no flowers. There was a murmur of approval at the excellence of the prince's decision. So many people would have decided the other way. Bertha, she visited the park, but she was very sorry to find that there were no flowers in the park. For leaving her house, she had promised her aunt that she would not pick any of the prince's flowers in the garden. Now she had meant to keep her promise, but now she feels very stupid, very silly, because there are no flowers in the park to pick. She cannot pick any flowers there. So immediately the kids asked, why weren't there any flowers? So the bachelor replies by saying that the pigs had eaten them all. And the gardener of the prince, he had already advised prince that he cannot have both. He cannot have pigs as well as flowers. You should choose either one. So the prince had decided that he would not have any flowers in the park, but he decided to have pigs. Now the kids were very happy with the prince's decision. Why? Because many people would have decided the other way. Many people would have decided to choose flowers in their park. But this prince had chosen pigs, and the kids were very much happy with his decision. There were lots of other delightful things in the park. There were ponds with gold and blue and green fish in them, and trees with beautiful parrots that said clever things at a moment's notice, and hummingbirds that hummed all the popular tunes of the day. Bertha walked up and down and enjoyed herself immensely, and thought to herself, if I were not so extraordinarily good, I should not have been allowed to come into this beautiful park and enjoy all that there is to be seen in it. Her 3 medals clinked against one another as she walked, and helped to remind her how very good she really was. Just then, an enormous wolf came prowling into the park to see if it could catch a fat little pig for its supper. The bachelor continued. He said there were lots of other delightful things in the park, and they were ponds with gold, blue, and green fishes in them, and trees with beautiful parrots that would say clever things when the time was perfect, and also hummingbirds that would sing some beautiful tunes the entire day. So Bertha walked up and down and she enjoyed herself over there. She thought to herself that if she wasn't so very good, she would not have got the chance to visit this beautiful park and enjoy all that was there in that park. So she was very happy, she was very proud. And when she walked over there, her medals clinked together and they started making that same sound. And those medals reminded her how good she was. Now, immediately, she saw something there, and it was an enormous, huge wolf. It had come to the park to see if he could catch a little fat pig for its supper, for its dinner. What color was it? Asked the children amid an immediate quickening of interest. Mud color all over, with a black tongue and pale grey eyes that gleamed with unspeakable ferocity. The first thing that it saw in the park was Bertha. Her pinafore was so spotlessly white and clean that it could be seen from a great distance. Bertha saw the wolf and saw that it was stealing towards her, and she began to wish that she had never been allowed to come into the park. She ran as hard as she could, and the wolf came after her with huge leaps and bounds. She managed to reach a shrubbery of myrtle bushes, and she hid herself in one of the thickest of the bushes. The wolf came sniffing among the branches, its black tongue lolling out of its mouth, and its pale grey eyes glaring with rage. Bertha was terribly frightened and thought to herself, "If I had not been so extraordinarily good, I should have been safe in the town at this moment." However, the scent of the myrtle was so strong that the wolf could not sniff out where Bertha was hiding, and the bushes were so thick that he might have hunted about in them for a long time without catching sight of her. So he thought he might as well go off and catch a little pig instead. Bertha was trembling very much at having the wolf prowling and sniffing so near her, and as she trembled, the medal for obedience clinked against the medals for good conduct and punctuality. The wolf was just moving away when he heard the sound of the medals clinking and stopped to listen. They clinked again in a bush quite near him. He dashed into the bush, his pale grey eyes gleaming with ferocity and triumph, and dragged Bertha out and devoured her to the last morsel. Now the kids were listening to this very interestingly, and they asked what color was it. So the bachelor responded saying that the color of that wolf was mud color, and it had a black tongue and pale grey eyes, which was twinkling, gleamed, shined with ferocity, that is violence, brutality. And the first thing that the wolf saw in the park was Bertha. Why? Because her pinafore, the dress that she was wearing, was spotlessly white and clean, and that could have been seen from a very long distance also. Now Bertha saw the wolf, and she saw that the wolf was coming towards her to eat her, and she began to wish that she had never been allowed to come into that park. And she started running as fast as she could. But the wolf was also running towards her. She managed to reach a shrubbery. Myrtle is nothing but it's a flowering plant. So she reached the bushes of myrtle, and myrtle is known for its strong smell. She hid herself in one of the thickest of the bushes. Now the wolf came sniffing near those branches, near those plants, and his black tongue was hanging out of his mouth, and its pale grey eyes had that brutality and anger. Now Bertha was terribly frightened, and she thought to herself, if she had not been so very good, she would not have been here. She would have been safe in the town at this moment. Now, the scent of that myrtle, it was so strong, as I said, the wolf could not sniff out Bertha's smell, and the wolf would not make out where Bertha was hiding. And the bushes were also so thick that if he enters any of those bushes, he would spend lot of time in searching Bertha. And again, there was no guarantee that he would be able to find her. So the wolf thought, instead of wasting my time here, I will go in search of some little pig in the entire park. Now Bertha, she was trembling with fear. She was so scared, she started trembling very badly, and she was trembling because the wolf was somewhat near to her. She could see the wolf, so she was very much scared. Now when she trembled, when she started shivering, the metal medals that she was wearing, it started clinging to each other. It started hitting each other, and it started making the sound. And when it made the sound, the wolf that was about to leave from that place, he stopped moving and he started hearing from where the sound was coming. And he realized where Bertha was hiding, because the second time when it clinked, he knew that Bertha was hiding there, and with full of anger and victory, he went, dragged Bertha out of the bushes, and he ate her. All that was left of her were her shoes, bits of clothing, and the 3 medals for goodness. Were any of the little pigs killed? No, they all escaped. The story began badly, said the smaller of the small girls, but it had a beautiful ending. It is the most beautiful story that I ever heard, said the bigger of the small girls with immense decision. It is the only beautiful story I have ever heard, said Cyril. Now all that was left out of Bertha was her shoes, little bits of clothing, and the 3 medals that she had for goodness. And the kids asked whether any of the little pigs were killed or hurt. So the bachelor said, no, they all escaped. Now the smaller of the small girls, she said, the story began badly. It was not good in the beginning, but it had a very beautiful ending. Now the bigger of the small girls also said that it is the most beautiful story that she has ever heard in her life. They were so happy with the story. Even the boy, Cyril, he also said that it is the only beautiful story that he has ever heard. A dissentient opinion came from the aunt. A most improper story to tell to young children. You have undermined the effect of years of careful teaching. At any rate, said the bachelor, collecting his belongings, preparatory to leaving the carriage, I kept them quiet for 10 minutes, which was more than you were able to do. Unhappy woman, he observed to himself as he walked down the platform of Templecombe station. For the next 6 months or so, those children will assail her in public with demands for an improper story. But the aunt had some different opinion about it, and she said, this is the most improper story to tell to young children, and whatever careful teaching that I have done from so many years, you have changed it. This is not good. She did not like it. Now, the station had almost arrived. They had almost reached Templecombe, and the bachelor was collecting his belongings so that he could leave. And when the aunt said something like that, he said, I was able to keep them quiet for 10 minutes, which you were not able to do. and he got down from his carriage. He walked down the platform of Temple Combe and he thought to himself that this lady, she's such a unhappy woman, and for the next 6 months or so, these children will always attack this aunt in public with demands for an improper story. I do hope you have understood this beautiful, wonderful lesson. In case you have any doubts, you can comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and do keep watching for more videos. Thank you and stay safe.